Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome to a brand new video. I'm happy to be back here. If you're watching this for the first time from Instagram, I welcome you. And if you're watching this from YouTube, I'm happy to be back. And so I have been gone for about 6 weeks, and that is because I was in India and Central Asia for the past 6 weeks. And now I'm very grateful to be back home, to be able to go back to my studies and continue where we have left off here. But before that, this video will be about a reflection of my trip to India and Central Asia, which includes Xinjiang, Western China here. The main purpose of my travels, and as well as all the places that I've traveled to, the main reason by default is because of the ayah of the Quran. And this is very important because Allah SWT questioned us. Do we even hear a sound from the past civilization? Meaning the people of the past, do we even hear a sound? We do not. Because all these people have already gone. And whatever they have left are for us to see. But not just for us to see for fun. To take photographs and then to bring back as memories to paste in our walls and so forth. But for us to take lessons from them. Lessons from whatever historical remains that are left by the people of the past. Whatever writings that they have left us, it is for us to take heed, for us to take lessons. And if we do that, if we are able to do that, then our travels will be much more meaningful because there is always a higher purpose. It's a much better purpose for us to travel and to learn something from that we can change our life, or something that we can learn that impact our life significantly, and that is a much better endeavor to execute or to actually undertake. And so that was my main intention, to visit the people of the past, to see their ruins, to see their civilizations, as well as to see the civilizations of the people of the present day. Because the civilization that is in Central Asia is definitely different from the civilization that I'm living here. And so this is actually prevalent, and I confirm this because I've been to Central Asia. So you can see many different things that are done differently. Many different things that are done differently here in Southeast Asia as compared to in Central Asia. And so, Alhamdulillah, the trip has been a success. Everything went smoothly, and it was really a fantastic trip. And so one of my favorite places in Central Asia is actually in Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan. It is a place, it is my favorite because nobody hassles me. It is a place where I can walk freely on the street without being hassled, without being heckled. The only place on the street. And so wasn't heckled and hassled at the bazaar. Was able to walk on the streets without being hassled and heckled, and so, which is why Bishkek is my favorite place here, right? So I can understand, and I've seen many problems during my travels in Central Asia. The problems of the region, and there's a problem every single place on earth, right? There are problems here where I'm from. There are problems everywhere, and so the problems that I see and witness in Central Asia is of two kinds, right? And this is a division between the society which came from the Soviet era and the society that came post-Soviet era. Right? From my observation, the people of the past, right, those pre-modernity, so to speak, right, they do not want to go the modern route. But the people that are born in the modern era, they want to progress. And by progress, they mean they want to follow the Western tradition. They want to follow the Western culture. They want to embrace the Western culture. They want to be westernized, so to speak. Right. Obviously, not everybody. Right. And so there is a kind of a friction in the society, in the community. A kind of friction that I observe at a very minute scale. But even at a very minute scale, I'm able to observe this. right? But only Allah knows how grandiose is actually a problem, right? And so how is this different from my community, right? The answer is that it is not much different at all. Right? The education that is being focused here is very much westernized. Right? And the culture that has been done here is pretty much very westernized already. We have lost the plot, basically. We have lost the plot. Right? But Central Asia has not. And so that is a kind of light at the end of the tunnel there. Right? There's always a good and bad. In every culture, in every society, there's a good and bad. There's a good thing that happens from the West, and there's a bad thing that happens from the West. There's a good things that happen from the East, and there are multiple bad things that happens from the East as well. So there's bad and good in every single place. Right? So the question to put forward here is that, are we taking something that is bad, or are we taking something that is good into our culture, into our civilization? Right? And so that is a question that I think, from my observation, the people down there are taking more of the bad things from the West instead of taking the good things. Right? No doubt they're taking the good things as well, but they're taking an ample bad things also from the West. And so, yeah, that is something that I observe. Right? But from an individual perspective, right? From an individual perspective, right? What can we do to ensure that we preserve our culture, our tradition, right? And also our religion? This is the most important thing. Right? So we want to preserve our culture and our tradition, and that is also, I can see, right? A lot of people, especially the more conservative ones, the people that are not living in cities like Tashkent, for example, the people at the region, right? They want to preserve their culture and their tradition. But the people in Tashkent, majority of them, they want to embrace the Western culture, right? And so, at which point in time, or as any individual, what can we do, right, so that we actually preserve our culture and our tradition, but most importantly, we also make sure that we do not compromise our religion, right? Because if we look at the history, whenever there's a different ideas, whenever ideas came in flux from different parts of the world into a society, it always affects the religion. It always affects the religion, or the mentality of people and how they view religion, which is a very, very common thing. For example, liberalism, Liberalism changes one's perspective towards Islam, or towards Christianity, towards Judaism, okay, towards all these other different religions. Secularism, for example. Communism. Nationalism, for example. All these isms, there's an ample good, no doubt, but there's also an ample bad. Right? And so we should learn about them instead of just embracing this culture because our friends embrace them, or because we want to be cool. Right? Because at the end of the day, if we want to be cool at the expense of our own degradation, then we are being a fool. Right? So we do not want to be portrayed as cool, but at the end of the day, we are actually a fool. So we do not care. We do not want to be amongst those people, right, who have a shallow kind of mindset. Right? They just want to fit in with the society. They want to blend in with the society. But at the end of the day, they have nothing up here, which is the most important faculties that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has granted. Human beings. The separation between animals and humans are actually our intellect, not our brain. Animals have brain, but our intellect. What is the difference between brain and intellect here? Right? So brain is actually the thing that you have in here, but the intellect is what we make use of the brain, what derives from our brain, our thinking process. Right? And so we want to use our intellect. Right? We do not want to be cool, but actually we are being fooled. Right? And so majority of people want to be cool, but they are actually a fool. No, we want to protect ourselves. So we do not want to compromise our culture, our tradition. Okay? But the most important thing is we do not want that our culture and tradition, no matter whether they have influences from the East, influences from the West, the South, or whatever it is, this shouldn't affect our religion. Because the most important thing is that if you're a Muslim, if you're a Christian, if you're a Jew, whatever you are, if you believe that your scripture come from God, then you jolly well wants to preserve, or you want to act in accordance to your religious book, because that is the most important thing, right? Because the Torah, the Injil, the New Testament, the Quran, right, doesn't come from your culture, doesn't come from your tradition, right? It came from God, right? If you believe that the New Testament is the revelation given to Jesus, which the disciples of Jesus, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, disciples of Jesus and their disciples, as she wrote down the teachings of Jesus, wouldn't you want to follow what Jesus has to say? If you believe that the Quran is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has revealed the Quran as a guidance, as well as a rahmah, as mercy for humankind, wouldn't you want to follow it, right? Even by following it, meaning you have to abandon your culture and your tradition. And so these are the kinds of reflections that one should make. Right? If your culture and your tradition gets in the way of your religion, for example, if it is part of the Turkish culture to look at the bottom of the pot to tell the fortune, right? And there are people still practicing this today. Right? And so just because this is your tradition, are you still going to practice or engage in it? For example, another example is alcohol. Right? It is within their culture to drink, not like the Western culture, like Germany, for example, they drink every single night. But it is part of their culture and tradition to drink at certain occasions, even though the Quran says stay away, okay? Stay away from intoxicant. So are you going to embrace your culture and your tradition at the expense of your religion? So if your culture and your tradition gets in the way of religion, what are you going to do? Are you going to stay firm upon your religion, or are you going to stay firm upon your culture and tradition? So which are your perspective? Which is more important to you? Right? If you believe that the Quran is the revelation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right, wouldn't you want to adhere to the Quran, and by this abandon your tradition, abandon your culture? Right? But there are implications according to you. Yes, there are implications. There are implications every single place. But what are the bigger implications? Right? What are the bigger implications? Right? For example, the implications if you abandon alcohol, right? If you abandon alcohol, for example, people would say that your friends or your close friends would say that you are no longer cool, or whatever it is that they might say. I don't know what they say, right? So whatever it is that they say, right? At the end of the day, right, do you want to just listen to what they have to say, and afterwards you don't care about them anymore, right? Or you want to disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and be with your friends? Which one is much more important? Which one has the greater power or has the greater authority, right, that can affect your life, severely affect your life? Which one? Your friends or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Right? In positive as well as in negative. Right? Well, however way you want to look at it, always look at the positive. Right? But suppose you want to look at the negative. Your friends will only say a few things about you, and after that, after you explain, I'm trying to better myself as a Muslim, right? This is also your opportunity to give da'wah to your friends. Right? You know, our religion say we cannot drink alcohol. In fact, our religion say we should stay away, not drink, but stay away, meaning you shouldn't even get close. So this is an opportunity for you to give da'wah, right? To pass on the religious knowledge to your friends. They could be ignorant, right? And so it depends on your perspective. So if you want to embrace your culture and tradition at the expense of your religion, the choice is yours. And so as a human being, we are given intellect. We should always make the better choice. And the better choice here definitely is to obey the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is incomplete. We should also abstain from the prohibition of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay? Whatever Allah has commanded us to stay away from, we should stay away from. And whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded us to do, we should do it, fulfill it, because it is our obligation, especially the 5 daily salah. If you are a Muslim, it is never an excuse to not pray the 5 daily salah, right? Because this is a very strong case. If you cannot pray standing up, you pray sitting down. If you cannot pray sitting down, you pray lying down. Right? And so there's no excuse, right? And every single human being on the face of this earth, at some point in their life, will actually miss their salah. Right? They will miss their salah. This is the reality of the situation. Right? But it's what you do afterwards that matters. Are you going to be remorseful after you miss your salah? Are you going to feel like nothing is happening? Nothing is wrong. So we should always be remorseful whenever we miss our salah. Right? Because the Quran has commanded us to pray. And also the Hadith has commanded us to pray. Okay, the Prophet ﷺ, the authentic sayings of the Prophet ﷺ. Okay. Muslims should pray 5 times a day at all costs. Right? When we are traveling, we have the leniency to shorten or combine our prayers. Right? That is from amongst the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But whenever we are at our home, the place of our abode, then it is incumbent upon us to actually fulfill the 5 daily prayers at a specific time. This is very important. And this is very difficult to do, and all of us actually are not able to consistently pray on time. Right? And obviously the next level will be to pray in congregation at the masjid every single salah, especially the final prayer, and especially the first prayer. Right? Because there is a hadith, those who pray with the final prayer in congregation and those who pray the first prayer in congregation is as if they have prayed the entire night. Right? And so there's a great reward for that. Right? But leaving the reward aside, because the reward is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we shouldn't focus on the reward. We should focus on bettering ourselves. And as Muslims, the most important thing that we should better ourselves on is our salah. Because this is the most important commandment after the Shahadatain, which is after the testimony of faith. If you're a Muslim, you already passed that. You already have the testimony of faith. You already believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You believe in the Prophet and all the previous prophets. You believe in Allah's revelation. Okay, the book, the Quran, the Injil, the Torah, the Zabur, the Suhuf of Ibrahim and Musa, right, and all the previous scriptures that Allah have revealed in the past that are not mentioned. Right. You believe in the unseen, you believe in the last day, right, you believe in Qadar, for example, right, and all the other pillars of Iman. You believe in all those things. Right. So you already passed that. That is your Shahadat, part of your Shahadatain, your testimony of faith. Now it comes to the Salah. Okay. The 5 daily salah. If you miss your salah on purpose or because you feel that you don't need to pray because my mazhab or my imam says I do not need to pray this, right? Or Fulan says I do not need to pray this, right? Then are you going to believe them? Or are you going to ask them for proof text? Are you going to take the time to investigate this proof text, or are you going to just take it for what it is? It depends on how committed are you. It depends on how committed you are to your faith, to your religion. Right? And so people can be committed to their work. People can be committed to their culture and their tradition. Right? Are you going to be committed to your faith? Are you going to be committed to your religion? Are you just going to take this as past play or as pastime? Religion is just something that you do on the side because your family does it. Religion is just something you do on the side because you want to celebrate Eid, for example, right? And you barely fast Ramadan, right? You barely pray, but you want to be overzealous of your culture and your tradition. Right? And so, have you actually gotten the right perspective in your life here? In today's world, even in my very local community here, right? As well as in Central Asia, I've seen. Right? People are always overzealous of their culture and their tradition, but they are not even concerned about religion. Right? And so for me, this is something very appalling. This is something that people should reconsider. People should reconsider. Right? Because if your culture and your tradition is being put first at the expense of your religion, something is not right there. Because the most important thing is your religion should come first. If you believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if you profess yourself as Muslims, right? Remember, there's no such thing as a non-practicing Muslim. This is a term invented by the people, by the liberals, right? So do not be fooled by them. This is a term invented by people who doesn't want to have anything to do with Islam. They're just Islam by name, or they're just Christians by name. They're just Jews by name. They're just Hindus by name. They're just Taoists by name. Right? They're just Buddhists by name, even though Buddhism is not a religion, it's a way of life. Right? Or they're just Zoroastrian by name. They're just Baha'i by name. I can name you all 2,000 religions. Right? There's always a liberal in every different religion. In every religion, there's always a liberal. And so these liberals who always want to point something out. Okay? Well, I've just professed this because I don't know. I'm a Baha'i just because I don't know. I'm a Zoroastrian because I don't know. I'm a Muslim because I don't know. Because I want to celebrate Eid, as a kid, growing up, my parents brought me to Eid, so on and so forth. I don't even believe in it. So these are from the liberal camps. There's no such thing. There's no such thing as a non-practicing Christian. There's no such thing as a non-practicing Jews. There's no such thing as a non-practicing Muslim. These are terms invented. And a lot of people fell prey for it. So do not be fooled. Right? Do not want to be cool, but actually you are a fool. And so if you profess yourself as Muslims, then you should try your very best every single day. There should be progress. And you should measure your own progress. You should set yourself a target, set yourself a timeline. Right? If you believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as the final messenger, as the last messenger, there's no other imams after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Right? There's no other Nabi after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Right? There's no one received divine, there's no one being divinely appointed after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Right? There's no one. People should always research their texts. Right? Go back to the very sources of their texts. Okay? In academic study, we call this source criticism. Right? People should learn about source criticism. This is a methodology in academic studies, in higher academic studies, right? Especially in the field of philosophy, in the field of theology, in the field of history even. Right? There is a mechanism called source criticism. It's you critique your own source. Right? In how do you critique your own source? In what ways? What are the outcomes? What are the objectives? The objective is to ensure that the source actually goes back to the people that claim to have given the source. For example, okay, this book by Imam Nawawi, right? Imam Nawawi, according to the printing here, this is a book by Imam Nawawi. Okay, the 40 hadiths by Imam Nawawi, right? But how do we know that this is exactly what Imam Nawawi actually wrote? How do we know? Right? And so source criticism, right, is being done by scholars, by academics, to make sure that whatever writings that is in here, okay, whatever writings that found in this book, goes back to the very manuscripts that we have, the earliest copy of the manuscripts that we have, right? So that is how far source criticism can bring you, right? And then you apply a different kind of methodology called textual criticism to determine that the earliest copy, the earliest extent in academia basically means available, right? The earliest extant manuscripts was actually faithfully copied by scribes, right? And if there are changes, then critical addition or apparatus of the text must be constructed. All these are under the field of textual criticism, right? And so all these are being done, right? And so you should make sure that your sources goes back to exactly where they claim to have originated from. Right? So, for example, I have here Sahih Muslim, okay, one of the Sitta, the 6 authentic book of hadiths, right? 6 authentic book of hadiths. Right? How do we know? How do scholars of Islam know that this is what exactly Imam Muslim actually wrote? They apply source criticism, right? And then they apply textual criticism, right? And the percentage is high in majority of the hadiths, right? Majority of the hadiths, right, is written by Imam Muslim, right? But that is the Western methodology. The Islamic methodology doesn't stop there. It goes on further, right? It goes on further. It questioned the very content, right? It questioned the very content. Is this aligned with the Quran and the Sunnah? If it doesn't align with the Quran and the Sunnah, whatever authors wrote, however prominent the Imam wrote, right? So, for example, you can have all these prominent Imam. For example, any Imam, for example, Imam the Haram, for example, the Imam the Masjid al Haram, may Allah forbid. For example, he wrote something. Okay, he is a great Imam. Okay? And by Imam here, I don't mean Imam like the Shi'i Imam. No, Imam basically someone who leads the Salah. Right? That is the definition of the Imam. Imam can also be a leader or community leader. Right? For example, the Imam of the Haram wrote a book. Okay? Just because he's Imam of the Haram doesn't mean whatever he writes is true, is correct. Right? And so Islamically, the scholars of Islam, they will criticize the content. Every single scholars of Islam, okay, no matter what they wrote, people always criticize, and that is a healthy way to move in academia. The word criticism today has been used in a very negative. It has its negative connotation towards it. But in academia, criticism is actually welcome. For example, because if I write a book, right, and I bring my book to a proofreader, what is the purpose of the proofreader? If the proofreader is just to read and say, good, well done, very good, fantastic, then basically this proofreader has not done his part. Right? The purpose of me bringing my book to a proofreader is is not so that I will get great comments like, you're a fantastic writer, MashaAllah, Tabarakallah. No, those are not the proofreader that I want. The proofreader that I want are the proofreader that criticize every single sentence or every single point that I make. Right? That is the proofreader that we want. Right? And so every single scholars of Islam in academia, as well as not in academia, whenever they write books, people will always criticize. Okay? And they welcome this criticism because why? If you are wrong, okay? If you are wrong, okay? If I am wrong, right, I must always be corrected. Which is why people today recite the Quran in Salah. Right? A 40-year-old man reciting the Quran in Salah make even a single guttural mistake, right? An 8-year-old kid must correct their mistake, and the Imam, right, or the person leading the Salah shouldn't be taken aback. How dare you, 8-year-old? You critique my recitation? Huh? You critique my recitation? How dare you? In fact, I'm your teacher. I taught you the Quran. And how dare you critique me? Embarrass me in front of everybody? No. That is not the mindset. Okay, that is not the mindset of people who have taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who fears Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? People who fears Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, okay, they will always want to be corrected, even for a single sound, even for a single pause. Right? In Quranic recitation, right, we have a pause. Right? So for example, if you don't pause in accordance to the Quran and the Sunnah, whatever the companions learn, right, the pause, right, or our pause is too short, or our pause is way too long, or we stretch, if we stretch an ayah way too long, right, then everybody is welcome to correct us. Now, obviously, if you're praying in a masjid, the people behind the imam are mostly the people that they have the Quranic knowledge also. So they are the ones who will correct the imams, right? It's not for everybody to correct, because there are etiquettes in correcting the recitation of the Quran, right? And so mostly the people behind the imams, it is their responsibility. They are not just there for show, right? So if you want to pray behind the imam, just jolly well know that whatever the imam is reciting, you should know your Quran. So don't pray behind the imam just because you want to show off that, see, I'm praying behind the imam. No, don't pray behind the imam, right? I'm not saying that you shouldn't, but just be careful, because if the imam made a mistake, and if you don't correct the mistake, the people might be looking at you, hey, what are you, man? You didn't correct the mistake of the imam, right? And so it's better to pray next to the Bilal. So you can look at the Bilal and say, hey, Bilal, you never correct the imam's mistake, right? And so anyway, jokes aside, I know this video is supposed to be a reflection of my trip to Central Asia, but basically it has turned into some other videos. So basically, some comments that I'll make is that people adhere, majority of the people, they are very proud of their tradition and their culture, which is not a bad thing. But it becomes a bad thing when you are being overly proud of your culture and your tradition, but you leave aside your religion, right? And so people should have a different kind of perspective, and that they should be very proud of their culture and very proud of their religion. And if they are not so proud of their culture and tradition, it's okay. Because at the end of the day, if we call ourselves Muslims, or if we call ourselves Christians, if we call ourselves Jews, or whatever it is that we call ourselves, right? We believe that the scripture that we have, that we hold in our hand, doesn't come from our culture and tradition. It comes from our religion. In fact, some of the scholars of Islam, some of the academics, they themselves, okay, mention that whenever someone embraces Islam or adopted Islam as their religion, or someone who is already a Muslim, right, then Islam become their culture and their tradition. Because Islam has a completely different culture and tradition as compared to the people in Central Asia, as compared to the people where I'm from. Right? For example, one of the tradition and one of the culture, so to speak, right? In my community, let's go to Central Asia, right? Is that they used to eat bread every certain kind of bread after Jummah, right? And I was surprised to learn that some of them say that this is actually part of their religion, Right? So after a few back and forth, I clarified that there's no precedence actually in the religion that you should eat a certain sort of bread after Jummah, right? Because the Prophet would have narrated the hadith. The Sahaba would have practiced, and every single Muslim on the face of this earth would have eat this certain kind of bread after Jummah. Because why? If this is part of the religion. But no, this is part of their culture and part of their tradition. So it has nothing to do with the religion, right? So culture and tradition, even though it is not really distinct from, it is distinct, but in today's world, it is very hard to separate between the two. Right? I'm not saying we should separate, right? We shouldn't separate. We should recognize which is which. Just for example, you have a bag of rice and you have a bag of sugar, right? You mix the two together. You can still tell which one is rice, which one is sugar. And you can pick up the rice, put it in a bag, and you can pick up the sugar, put it in a bag. And after 10 years, you will have a bag of rice and you have a bag of sugar. So you're able to separate. You're able to make this thing, right? But the problem in the world today here is not you have a bag of rice and you have a bag of sugar. You have a bag of salt and you have a bag of sugar, right? And so it becomes more difficult to make this thing, It becomes more difficult to separate. And that is the problem that encompass or that envelops us around the world today, whereby we have mixed culture and tradition at the expense whereby we thought whatever we are practicing, which is actually from our culture and tradition, and we thought that this is actually what the Prophet ﷺ used to do. And this is false. Right? So people should go back to the foundation, people should go back and learn their religion, and so that they are able to make this think. Knowledge is very powerful. If you do not have knowledge, you will forever lead yourself astray. And you will lead other people astray. And it becomes a problem. Right? And so it is much better for you to know more about your religion than for you to know more about your culture and your tradition and know less about your religion. Right? And so, ladies and gentlemen, hopefully this video adds some light, it benefits you, because at the end of the day, the purpose for us to travel or visit all this land is not for fun, not for enjoyment. Right? The purpose for us to visit all these different lands, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us the means to visit all these different lands, right? Because it is actually recommended by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran for Muslims to travel, for Muslims and non-Muslims, to travel to all these different lands, right? So that we can take lessons from them. We can take lessons from what the people of the past, the civilizations of the past, we can take lessons from what they have left for us to see. And we can also take lessons from what we witness and see and observe in our daily activities through these lands, through these countries that we travel to, that we visited, through our interactions with the people. The main purpose, the main aim is for us to bring ourselves closer towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that is the main purpose. Right? And if we travel to these different lands just for fun, just for enjoyment, just to show off to the people that I'm able to visit these places, right? Then basically we have not served a higher purpose. Our thinking has become very shallow, and then we are just thinking for ourselves, and we are not actually paving the way for us to become a better human being somewhere down the road. And with that, I end this video. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.